This is part 6 of my commentary on the Sacred Council's Constitution on the Liturgy from 1963. And today we're going to look at the Divine Office. The Divine Office is the Church's prayer book. We see it referred to in the Acts of the Apostles as, in quotations, the prayers. And daily, the Church prays this. All clerics, bishops, priests, and deacons are required to recite at least a part of the office every day. In my case, I read the what used to be called matins, we'll talk about in a minute, the office of readings, and morning prayer and evening prayer. And I also, on most days, pray one of the daytime prayers, which used to be called terce, sext, and none. And that refers to the hour of the day, middle of the morning, noon, and middle of the afternoon. And then Compline is the final prayer of the day, which is the bedtime prayer. So let's see what the Council had to say about this. And as usual, it starts in paragraph 83 with the background. The background is always the story of salvation, the incarnation, Jesus coming into this world and becoming, in a sense, himself a hymn sung throughout all the ages in the halls of heaven. And he brings everyone to himself. Remember, one of the things that the Messiah was supposed to do is to gather all the nations together in right worship and in right living. So he continues his priestly work through the agency of his church, and so they continue that process of praise and intercession for the world, and then, of course, of challenging the world to right living, and, of course, giving them the tools of grace to do that. So the office, 84 says, it goes back to those early days of the church, and this is important. It's put together so that the whole course of the day and the night is made holy by praising God. And when you put that together with the church's worldwide influence, you see that every moment of every day we are giving praise and thanks to God and interceding for the whole world. So this is, as it says here in 84, the voice of the bride addressed to her bridegroom. It's the prayer which Christ himself with his body addresses to the Father. In 85, the point is that whoever does it, clergy or laity, is fulfilling a duty of the church and sharing in the greatest honor of Christ's spouse, offering praise and thanks to God, along with the saints and angels in heaven who do this in the direct experience of the Trinity. The 86 talks about the priests who are in parochial situations, and notice it says pray without ceasing. Prayer influences our work for the church. So when I was teaching, I was in a sense praying, and my prayer really influenced my teaching. So priests, that's one of the most important responsibilities they have. I remember a story I read back in, I think, the 1960s, back when the office was still in Latin. Someone drove along the road and saw a priest kneeling by the side of the road. Under his headlights, he was reading a book, and it was towards midnight. He hadn't finished his divine office, which each day you're supposed to do. And so he was praying that prayer in his headlights. So in 81 we see, 85, 86, 81 is really a misnumbering of 87. So the restoration had begun before the council. And so there are here some decrees that they're adding to what had already been done in terms of reforming the office. Okay, because the purpose of the office is to sanctify the day, the traditional sequence of the hours is to be restored and related to the time of day when they're prayed. So, and it takes into account modern conditions. And what that means is maybe the prayers needed to be a bit shorter and they need to be fitted to the day. So there were some alterations for that purpose. So first, Lauds is morning prayer, Vespers is evening prayer, and we can still call them by those names, Lauds and Vespers. And they are called here the two hinges on which the office turns. So these are the chief office hours. They are generally the longer hours, and for instance, religious are generally bound to say both of those, to pray both of those. Compline is the end of the day, and that I call that a bedtime prayer. Matins was prayed in the middle of the night by the medieval monks, and still in some communities that is. They rise at midnight, as one of the Psalms says, and pray the Matins hour. It's called now the Office of Readings, and can be recited at any hour of the day. I do that, generally speaking, right before my morning prayer. And fewer psalms and longer readings, so more people will engage in it. And it's really beautiful. It has 3 psalms and 2 long readings. One is from the scriptures, and the other is from the fathers of the church, or the council, or the doctors of the church. D may have been a mistake. The hour of prime, that was supposed to be, say, right after breakfast, and they suppressed it. Now, you can still say it, but there's nothing in the modern publications to help you do that. Why do I say it was probably a mistake to get rid of it? That's when the martyrology, the story of the many, many Catholic martyrs, was read, and each day would have a martyr. And each day does have at least one martyr. So I believe my judgment is that that was a mistake. It was a big mistake? No, it was a little mistake. Now, terce, sexton, none are what was now called the daytime prayers. But you can select any one of the 3 according to their respective time. So usually, in my holy hour, I will pray, well, I call terce, which is the first mid-morning prayer. Now, the divine office is the public prayer of the church, but it's also a source of nourishment for personal prayer. So we are supposed to, all of us, are supposed to attune our minds to the voices when praying it. So if you've done this, well, in my case, I've done it for 25 years. So if you've done that for that long, then these things are memorizable. And it's important to focus on the words, or you're not really getting any spiritual benefit out of it. So the ancient and venerable treasures are to be adapted so that those to whom they are handed on may more extensively and easily draw profit from them. So this is what Pope Benedict called the continuity. Now, in 91, we see that the Psalms are no longer to be distributed through 1 week. Now, there are 4 weeks of Psalms. And so we get more Psalms, and we get And since we're only doing 3 psalms per hour, then you can do this. You can put the 150 psalms throughout a 4-week cycle. And some of them are repeated. Now, the Psalter was revised, and we are using a new Psalter both in Latin and soon, we're told, in English. Now, we heard that the new translation or the new version of the office for at least the last 10 years would be issued soon. We still don't have the books, so that is a problem because some are using the new Psalms and some are using the old. Most of us are using the old, I believe. Readings from sacred scripture. So there's more readings from scripture than there used to be. And they say better select the fathers, doctors, and ecclesiastical writers. I wasn't doing that before the council, so I don't know if it's better, but it's good. It's what we see is very good. Accounts of martyrdom are recorded to the facts of history. Well, we don't read those anyway now, so hopefully they do, but it doesn't really matter. In 93, hymns restored to their original form. What we have now in the one published in the 1970s, they've taken hymns from all kinds of places, and mostly not from the ancient hymns of the Catholic Church. The new version is supposed to have the hymns from the tradition of the Church, so we'll see. So there's a lot of hymns that still retain some Protestant flavor to them. Each of them be prayed at a time when most closely corresponds with its true canonical time. That generally happens in those places where everybody prays together. So then there are some general rules about the communities, religious communities, and clerics are bound to pray the entire office every day, either in common or individually. And generally speaking, that we must pray lauds and vespers and encourage to pray the office of readings and compline and one of the daytime prayers. And here's can liturgical service substitute for the divine office? Yes. But you really need permission from your superior on that. Now, getting into the laity. Those perform the public prayer of the Church who, in virtue of their constitutions, recite any short office. So, for instance, the Legion of Mary can have their own office. 99, the most important part of 99 is, it is fitting that the office, both in choir and in common, be sung when possible. In my previous parish, on Saturday and Sunday morning, we had the common singing, and all but the homily was sung of morning prayer. When I left, that practice died out. I'm not aware of any church where, say, Vespers, because Vespers is the one preferred, is still sung, say, on Sundays here in this diocese. This is what they're asking. Vespers celebrated in common in church on Sundays and the more solemn feasts. I don't know any place in San Antonio Diocese where that is done. Latin language is to be retained, and the but has taken over here, if you don't mind my saying that. In traditional Latin communities, it's still recited in Latin. And in some of the Benedictine places, it's still recited in Latin. But the competent superior is usually the bishop or the head of the religious order. And vernacular with a group of the faithful, there is a great deal of flexibility in the recitation of the office.